Can you start a podcast with me, please? I need something to do.
Pastrnak sent it out in front of Malkin to save. They score! Elias Lindholm looks to the heavens.
Here's a chance. Potter right in and goal. He scores. Oh my! What a move by the rookie.
2-on-1. Pastrnak moving in with Marchand. Get it to it. Score!
The zone. Coyle dances in. Backhand score!
Lindholm right wing corner. Pastrnak is there. He scores! David Pastrnak wins it for Boston.
Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of Bruins Tape to Tape. We are recording on Monday, May 11th, and I'd like to wish a belated Happy Mother's Day to all of our moms who are listeners. We hope that you all had a great day. I know that I did, and I'm hoping my co-host, Caroline with AK, had a wonderful day as well. Welcome in. Happy belated Mother's Day.
Thanks, Maria. Same to you. We had a wonderful day. The weather cooperated and we got to spend a lot of time outside and it was delightful.
It was a beautiful day for me as well. Got to play a little golf with my daughter-in-law and her mom. Spend a lot of quality time outside with family and my little granddaughter. So yes, it was an awesome day. There's still hockey to talk about, even though it's not directly related to the Boston Bruins, because we are in the thick of the Stanley Cup playoffs right now. We're slowly getting down to the bottom line of those teams that are separating themselves. And typically, folks, we do our setting of the table and then we do our spin around the rink. But it's summer. We're being a little bit more cash. So we're just going to dive right in to talk about the teams left in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And then we're going to get down to the nitty gritty of the Bruins end of season, the end of season press conference by Neely and Company. We have some very detailed conversation. We're going to have some very detailed conversation about a video clip from Behind the B that directly involves David Pastrnak. And we both have some thoughts about that. And there's been quite a lot of feedback received on the socials and on our local sports talk radio shows and other podcasts about that pasta clip. But let's start with the Stanley Cup playoffs. So I want to start with the Carolina Hurricanes and the fact that they have now swept in fine fashion both teams that they have played against. So I ask you, my friend, are they the real deal? 2 sweeps.
They are scary good. And this is a team that has been quietly dominant for at least the last 5 years. They certainly were the pain in the behind for the Bruins for a number of years, a couple of seasons.
Thorn in their side is what I would call them. An absolute freaking thorn in their side.
And it's interesting because, especially considering this entire season, you and I were both in agreement that it never really seemed like there was a team that took hold of the East because there was just so much competition for nearly every level within the bracket structure that it just never seemed like any team in particular took off. And who knows, maybe that's just because in comparison to the West, things were so much more different because Colorado really started the season like they were shot out of a cannon. So anything that was happening in the East never could compete. But this is a team that was certainly well in control of their division all season. And we've watched a lot of Carolina hockey over the last few years because, again, they have been in the playoffs and they've gone deep into the playoffs for many years at this point. And it's been pretty boring hockey leading up to this. But I have to say, first of all, this Carolina team, they've always been good. They've always been extremely dominant when it comes to shots, shot attempts, and shots on goal. That's obviously been their MO all season. This is one of the teams, few teams, I would almost argue, to the next level in the playoffs, noticeably. They are scary good. They are efficient. They are relentless. And their goaltender is lights out. He is playing amazingly well. And I think of all the years that I have seen Carolina play in the postseason, this is the strongest I have ever seen them be. To the point where I actually said to some folks, both in the Discord, my family members, my friends, I think this is a team that, honest to God, could go all the way. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a Colorado-Carolina final. Yeah. Because while the way to stop Carolina may sound simple on paper, to be able to execute it, I think would be incredibly difficult. The team that can beat Carolina is the team that has the ability to defensively outplay Carolina. Because you may have a very good goaltender, but can your very good goaltender survive 40 shots a night?
No, not every night.
Not every night.
Not every night. And I'm in full and complete agreement with you on all of your points. And I am going to go as far as to say that Carolina will destroy either the Sabres or the Habs, because neither one of those teams seems defensively structured or sound, in my view. And I have been watching some of these games, not intently, but especially where the Sabres are concerned, they have a lot of defensemen that, forwards even too, standing around watching, puck watching.
Yeah.
And Carolina is just going to chew you up and spit you out if that's the way that you're going to play. And Taylor Hall has the 5th highest point total for playoff players still playing right now.
Yeah. You want to talk about a second line that has overproduced and overperformed?
You think the Bruins could have used a guy like that? Oh, wait a minute. We had him and we traded him away.
Yeah. For what?
So,
I don't even remember.
My frustration, we're going to get to that. As much as I can't stand Rob Brindamore, I don't know what it is. He bugs me.
He's obnoxious.
That team is
scary.
Freaking scary.
I think at this point, the only thing in Carolina's way to getting to the Cup final is Carolina, because notoriously for the last few years, they've dominated early rounds and then completely choke. Now,
I don't see it. I haven't seen any hiccups. Even when they get behind, even if
which has only happened once.
All post, right? It seems to fuel their fire, honestly, when they get behind.
And the other thing that we have also talked about is the fact that rest may be a good or bad thing. And quite frankly, the fact that they swept Philadelphia so quickly, depending on how long this Sabres Habs series goes, Carolina could be sitting for the better part of 2 weeks. Really. Because by the time they were done, the Habs hadn't even played their 3rd game. So what's that going to mean for either side? Because one side's going to have just come off of playing, which again, could be good, could be bad.
Could be bad, right?
You never know.
If they don't get themselves, they, meaning the Carolina Hurricanes, don't get themselves to the Stanley Cup Finals, what a shock and what a disappointment that will be, because they are looking that good that I don't think anyone in the East still left in the game stands a snowball's chance in hell of beating them.
No. Like I said, we were having this conversation in our Discord about, is there a team that could defensively outmaneuver Carolina? And it was a good discussion. There was points made in favor of Montreal over the Sabres.
Buffalo.
Of course, they have to both. One of them has to get out. Right. The thing is, prior to their most recent game, I would have said I haven't seen anything particularly impressive on both sides, only because each game leading up to that point had been because the other team didn't show up. The first game, Buffalo was in full control because Montreal really just, they weren't on time. They didn't show up on time. They just were late to the series, basically. And then the same thing happened, but inversely for game 2, Buffalo didn't start on time and the Habs did. Things have started to get more interesting as the series has progressed. And I will say, prior to especially last night's game in Montreal, I really enjoy their goaltender, Dobush. I think he's a great rookie. He's a good goaltender. Habs jersey aside, he had been underperforming, in my opinion, in the series up until literally last night. And he was fantastic. Still cannot tell what's actually happening out there, because I will say this, in rewatching the highlights of that game, there is an expression in hockey where you play the man, not the puck. And that's an important concept, because if all you do is focus on the puck, you've got all these other players around you who are then getting into position to receive the puck, and the puck gets passed a lot faster than you can skate. And if all you're doing is watching the puck, your man that you're responsible for covering is now open. And I got to tell you, every single one of those goals, and then some, scored by the Habs, were the result of Buffalo playing the puck and not the man. The number of opportunities that Montreal had where the player was wide open, had nobody on him, that was surprising, because I'm not recalling having seen that a lot in the Bruins series. And if
let's not forget, the Bruins were nowhere near as quick, first
True.
of all. Nowhere near
True.
as quick as the Habs are. Their offense in that series, the Bruins, was not at all fluid
Garbage.
in any way, shape, or form.
And look, Lyon is also a very good goaltender. His areas of weakness are the cross-ice pass, which we saw in, I want to say, game 2, where both goalies actually really struggled with the cross-ice pass and got scored on in those instances. And I think that Lyon did a good job, considering the number of times he basically had to fend off a Canadian all on his own. And a couple of those goals were just greasy goals. One of them got knocked in basically off his own defender, which, again, to the point saying that the Sabres players were just not where they were supposed to be. One thing that the Sabres had been really good at, especially playing against Boston, was the ability to take advantage of opportunities. But the thing is, the Habs are not presenting the Sabres with opportunities. Basically, their one goal they scored there were 2 goals. One was just like a freak, like Dobush didn't have eyes on it at all. I don't know what he was looking at. But the second one was a power play goal. So they had to be on the man advantage just to even score.
So I don't know how that
you?
changed. Credit to Marty St. Louis. But those first couple of games, it seemed like Montreal couldn't score unless they were awarded a power play opportunity.
Yeah.
Where now it's all of a sudden they're getting offense 5-on-5. And some of their big guys are finally starting to show up, which could be very detrimental for Buffalo.
Yeah. So unless Buffalo figures out how to play the man and not the puck, as doing the opposite, things are not looking very good for them. But if what Montreal is doing is genuinely that dominating, are they that dominant, or are the Sabres underperforming?
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm kind of feeling like the Sabres are underperforming, not to take away anything from what Montreal has accomplished, begrudgingly, I will say. But thinking about it in terms of who they're going to have to play next, I don't know if it's enough. I really don't know if it's enough.
I don't think either team has enough.
No. Because by the time, especially if it is Montreal, and if this goes 5 games or 6 games, they'll have played almost 2 full rounds they'll have played maybe 13 games, and Carolina's only played 8. I don't know.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how Buffalo responds in their next game after getting beat down in similar fashion to how they beat down the Bruins. They lost 6-2. They lost 6-2.
That's embarrassing.
It is embarrassing. And
They look like the Bruins out there. I'm sorry.
no, they did. They did. No, what did I say in the Discord? The Habs did to the Sabres what the Sabres did to the Bruins on that Black Sunday game, where they just didn't show up to play in the first period and they found themselves down 4-0.
I wonder if Lindy Ruff will shake things up and throw UPL in instead of Lyon.
I don't know.
I'm not saying that Lyon has lost the net. I don't think that actually at all.
No,
But
I don't think that at all
surprised-
either. I think he was left high and dry.
He was. But I wouldn't be surprised if the coaching staff makes a goaltender change decision just to shake things up. I don't know. Because what else can you do? I don't know. But that's the East. I'm not really sure what's happening in the West. I know that
So West
the
is,
series is tied.
I mean, Minnesota's trying to make a series out of it.
They
which-
sure are. Holy cow, did they come back?
Oof.
Yep. Yeah. I don't know if that's sustainable for them. They did chase their starting goalie, but that would have only been for the one game. He'll be back for game 4. I don't know if their approach is a sustainable approach to continue on, to actually stop Colorado. I think, again, if Colorado and Carolina are the ones that are in the final, I think Colorado has an equally hot goaltender. They'd be potentially even in that regard. And I think, of course, Colorado has the elite goal scoring group that probably could get through any kind of defense. It's just whether or not they can stop the shots by Carolina. But that we're getting ahead of ourselves.
We're getting
That's
ahead
next
of
month's
ourselves.
problem.
The series that I'm surprised by, and I will admit, given what time the games start, I haven't seen a whole bunch of minutes in this series, is Anaheim and Vegas. Anaheim is.
Good on them.
So I'm
not watching that series because I just can't bring myself to care.
No, that's part of it. Part of it is it's like I'm not that invested that I'm going to
No.
be trying to keep my eyes open. But I will say this. The Vegas Golden Knights got rid of Bruce Cassidy, and now they're in a dogfight in this series. So I wonder if they're taking a look in the mirror saying, they still could have made the playoffs, and they could still be in this position right now without having fired Bruce Cassidy. But be that as it may, even with the Herculean performance of Mitch Marner in the previous game, they find themselves behind the 8 ball because the series is now tied 2-2.
Yeah. It certainly feels that way, even though it's tied. But perhaps that's just from the idea that it's Anaheim. I think the expectations there were also probably pretty low. And that's another team that's certainly exceeded expectations.
It just goes to prove the theory that we hear over and over again with regard to the Stanley Cup playoffs is just get in. Who cares where you're seated in some instances? Just get in.
Yeah, because you never know what's going to happen.
Right. So speaking of just getting in and never knowing what's going to happen, we now turn our attention to our Boston Bruins.
Yes.
And so we've had a couple of pieces of news items that came out just recently, one of which was the end of season presser, which normally takes place after every season is officially over. And that happened here in Boston last week. I don't even remember what day it was that Charlie Jacobs, Cam Neely, and Don Sweeney addressed the media. Now, normally you hear about this in advance. There are links that are sent out where you can follow the press conference live. Now, unless I was under a rock or totally not paying attention, I had no idea that it was occurring until I started seeing tweets from media people covering the press conference.
Yeah, I had no idea either. And I feel like most of the folks in our fabulous Discord also were not aware. This one was weird. Marco Sturm was not there. In the past, we've seen the coaches also in attendance. I don't know how common or uncommon that fact is, but it certainly felt very low key. And maybe it's because certainly last year we were looking for it because we were all very mad about last season. But this was very quiet. I'm not sure that there was a ton of news that even really came out of it, which is also a little surprising because you would think to some degree they would want to come out and be tooting their own horn because, as we will talk about in a little bit, the season was a success.
Well, it was certainly better than any of us expected, I think. Given the roster, you had a new rookie head coach. You had questions up and down your roster for the most part. So, yes, I would say they performed better than I expected to because I didn't even have them making the playoffs. And what I find annoying about both Neely and Sweeney, Charlie Jacobs to me is just a person who sits there, right? He's he's the anointed Jacobs family representative. Okay? He adds nothing of any value or significance.
I don't know why he's honestly even there. Because he wants to be. Give me a break.
And he says things, it's like, Charlie, just don't even talk because you sound like a clueless buffoon most of the time. To think that Neely and Sweeney just go to their wheel of fortune and spin the wheel and say, okay, what did we say 2 years ago? Oh, yeah, this might apply again to this season. So let's just regurgitate that same information that we already fed the media and our fan base 2-3 seasons ago.
Yes.
Now, and Neely continues, in my view, to talk out of both sides of his ass and his mouth. So we built it. Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong. If I have my facts incorrect, I will apologize. And you can say, no, Maria, you're dead wrong. Didn't we hear after the Bruins had their asses handed to them by the Florida Panthers that we needed to get stronger, tougher?
Yeah.
Okay. So then we try to build a team based on trying to defeat the Florida Panthers.
Hence the Zadorov signing.
Okay. Fast forward to this presser that took place just last week. And I hear Cam Neely say, we need to get faster. Wait a minute. Wait just a freaking minute. Now you're saying, because it seems to me we tried the we need to get faster thing. And then we went to the need to get stronger on the back end. So now we're going back to we need to get faster. So what team are we chasing now, Cam?
Right.
That we want to build our team against. And you idiot, we all know that we don't have a number one center, you buffoon. And whose fault is that? You morons, okay? You absolute unequivocal morons, because you didn't do your due diligence back when you had Krejci and Bergeron. How many freaking years?
Yeah.
How many freaking years? Then we hear Pasta say, I'm going to be turning 30. How many more kicks at the can am I going to get? Neely, in response to that, to volley back and not be full committal on getting his star player the help that he needs. They need to shit or get off the pot. Shit or get off the frigging pot. But if you don't address this gaping hole that you know that you have had for countless years now, how far do you think you're freaking going to get with this rebuild?
No.
How long is it going to take? And how much patience is Pasta going to have, or maybe any other veteran on that roster that you're looking at and saying, come on, guys, you got to roll up your sleeves and help. This is going to take a while. Really? How long is this going to take? You guys keep going out. Oh, and by the way, the one guy that you thought was going to fit the bill, now we know is damaged goods, because this guy, and I'm speaking about Elias Lindholm, has a chronic back issue.
Yep.
How many times are we going to hear about this back?
Yeah, agreed. One point that you said, oh, now we're back on the speed. I will say, yes, what was it? A couple of seasons ago, they said we need to get bigger, faster, stronger. They got stronger and they got bigger. But I would argue that they never went after anyone for speed. They never achieved that, even close. So that is almost like unfinished business that has been lingering since the departure of Jake DeBrusk. And the fact, I was just thinking about this last night, getting rid of someone like Jacob Lauko, he was fast, but they didn't offer to him. Boston needs to get faster. That's a given. I don't know what they're going to do. I genuinely don't know.
Neely did acknowledge the need for a number one set. But okay, we all know it. What are you going to do to address it? How are you going to address it? Are you relying on one of these young guys? Because if that's the case, then I'm not saying there's not potential there for Minton or Higgins, but we're talking another, 2 or 3 seasons down the road here at a minimum.
Yeah. We're looking at Don Sweeney's last year of this current contract. I'd like to say I would be shocked if it was renewed further, but then again, this is Boston, and he seems to be Cam Neely's favorite scapegoat, guy to do his dirty work. I don't have a ton of faith in whatever the front office can do. I'm thinking that this year's free agency class isn't that much better than last year's. They're gonna either have to figure it out with what they have, because this is something they've been talking about for literally 5 years.
And I know these guys don't grow on trees. I get it. But you've made any number of other hockey trades. And this was a priority need that continues to remain unaddressed.
Yeah.
And I don't know how far you think you're going to go without that. Pastrnak, and listen, we all know David Pastrnak is not as responsible with the puck as people would like him to be. But he's also touching the puck. You want him to touch the puck because you want him to score. So people can't shit all over him, right? He still put up a boatload of points.
Oh yeah.
Even without the help that he, in my view, should get to maximize his potential. He's been maximizing it even without that. But can you imagine if you get him a legit first-line center?
Just remember, before Patrice Bergeron retired, David Pastrnak hitting 60 goals.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen it. We've seen what he can accomplish with a competent center.
But, okay, for the people who were shitting all over Pastrnak for his playoff performances, okay, let me explain what happens, okay? The other team's number one line and your team's number one line typically go against each other, and they basically negate each other, right? It's even harder in the playoffs when you want to try to take advantage of that and get your number one guy away from the other team's number one guy is when you're at home and you get the last change. That didn't work to our advantage for whatever reason, because we sucked at home, and we sucked at home in the playoffs.
And that's also why secondary scoring is important.
You're not trading for Connor McDavid or Austin Matthews
or Brady Tkachuk.
That was the far-fetched one.
Christ.
And if you think that any of those guys are coming to Boston, okay, no, it's not happening. It is not happening.
Not just David Pastrnak for Brady Tkachuk, but the claim it should be David Pastrnak and Jeremy Swayman. I'm sorry. No one could possibly be that much of an imbecile. But speaking of David Pastrnak, so the other big thing.
The other big piece of news is, in case you haven't seen it, there was a Behind the Beat episode that was the Black Sunday game, as I call it, where the Boston Bruins were a no-show in the first period. And there was a clip of Pasta going into the locker room and just ripping into the team in such a manner that I never thought he had it in him to do. He said everything to his teammates that we were all saying to each other in the Discord or screaming at the TV, going, what a bunch of fucking no-shows. Embarrassing, disappointing. He said it all. And I didn't think that he was capable of it. He showed me a sign. Now, here's the takeaway that I took from that clip. As Pasta is throwing his stick down, ripping his gloves off, here's Morgan Geekie standing there, calmly taking off his chest protector and elbow pads like he could give two shits. That was my takeaway. I was looking at him in this video clip going, do you even care that he's ripping into all of you at this point in time? To me, Geekie's body language was like, I could give two shits right now. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but that was my two takeaways from that.
Yeah. He had already given up. I think it's really interesting that, look, this is not a new concept or take. Certainly, I've heard Elliot Friedman talk about this, that teams only share what they want known ever. And even teams without TV shows, because Some of them have them, some of them don't. Players will almost never publicly display any kind of frustration, anger, resentment, negativity towards their teammates in any kind of public manner. I find it fascinating that not only did we see this clip come out with David Pastrnak, but we also saw it with Jeremy Swayman when he got pulled in that one game.
And he wasn't targeting anyone. Let's make that clear.
No,
he was speaking to the entire team because everybody that was dressed for that game was a no-show in that first period, except for Jeremy Swayman.
And also, to be clear, just because we never see it, just because they don't make it public, doesn't mean it doesn't happen.
Doesn't happen.
Right? Please.
Right.
They hold each other accountable. But the fact that two leaders on the team publicly displayed or allowed to be displayed this degree of, I don't know what you want to call it, conflict, disagreement. I don't know what to make of it, but I find it very fascinating. And there's been a lot of discussion since that clip came out, in particular around David Pastrnak, that for a number of people, that is enough to just give the man the seat. And look, this is not to say that Charlie McAvoy doesn't care.
I'm not sure that one episode justifies giving someone the seat. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying he should or shouldn't have it. The rumors here around this area have always been, for some reason, Charlie McAvoy is the golden child where the Boston Bruins are concerned. Mm-hmm. It's been like that for quite some time. And I found it very interesting when Cam Neely was asked about the status of appointing a captain and making a decision about a captain for the upcoming season. That was something that they do want to address, that Marco Sturm would be heavily involved in those conversations. But he almost made it a point to say that, and I'm paraphrasing, and maybe I'm reading words into it, that this season wasn't really a fair assessment of that because Charlie had so many things going on with the injury and the illness to his son. I am telling you, you're going to hear it here first. You're going to hear it here first. I am telling you that they want, and when I say they, management wants to put that C on Charlie McAvoy's jersey.
I mean, I believe it.
And that rationale about not everyone really had the opportunity to show their leadership skills, blah, 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 blah.
How many games do you need? How many games do you need?
Again, that's just me. That's my take. Now, there are other discussions about the criteria for being a captain. Let's look at past Bruins captains and what they brought to the table. Zdeno Chara, intimidating, worked his ass off, always responsible, always 9 times out of 10, making the right plays. Therese Bergeron, same type of criteria. Ray Bourque, before him. Does Pasta have that in him yet? Because I will tell you, the argument is being made and will be made about the fact that Pasta is not as defensively responsible as people want him to be. That is still a component of his game that needs to develop and be brought to another level. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I'm just saying now I can make the same argument for Charlie McAvoy because I'm still on the fence when it comes to this player. He is not a franchise-altering defenseman in any way, shape, or form right now. I don't know if he ever will be. His offensive skills still need to be proven to me. I do think that sometimes defensively, he's not as consistent. Now this year, better. Absolutely better.
Absolutely.
He was in beast mode.
His best year.
Right? His best year statistically. Show me that. Show me that early and often. Okay? And I'll be in your corner, kid.
I like your thought experiment when thinking about past captains. And as you're describing them, one word pops into my mind. And this one word is one that I would use to describe David Pastrnak and not Charlie McAvoy. And again, I'm not like, I love David Pastrnak. He's not my guy, right? I'm same boat as you. I'm like, I'm not satisfied with either option, but whatever. One word, elite. Elite. Franchise altering elite player. Were any of those other captains perfect? No.
No.
You know?
Now, I'm not saying that they were. I'm
No,
not
but,
saying
you
that
know,
they
like,
were.
your argument about him not being as defensively minded as we would like, of course, absolutely. But that's also what happens when you are touching the puck as often as he is.
Absolutely.
And
you've
it's
got two or three guys on
Right.
you like super glue. Okay?
And when you are the other thing is, what he's working against is the fact that because he is the only one like him, and we've seen the lack of secondary scoring, the lack of depth scoring, well, it's easier for a team to neutralize the one reliable goal scorer and just be on him with that high pressure, as opposed to if there were multiple players. Again, look at the perfection line. We go back to that a lot, right? A team has to cover effectively 3 guys versus now they
you
only
can
have
just
to cover
focus
one.
on
So it's easier.
Hence
It's easier
and
to get
again,
off.
listen, I know they're all professional athletes, and I know in their heart of hearts, they know when they don't perform well. They don't need to hear it
Sure.
from us. They don't
Right.
need to hear it from us.
Yeah.
And for David to react in that manner after he heard the boos, of course, I'm sure they all heard the boos. And for him to say in the post game to be as reflective, sometimes, it backfires because they say something that you say to yourself, oh shit, maybe he should have taken 30 seconds before he answered that question. But when a season comes to an abrupt end and you're being reflective and you're looking at, from your perspective, I'm going to be 30 years old. How many more kicks at the can do I have at this, right? And that's your star player, your elite player, right? Don't you think that you've got to take that into consideration? He's not telling you what deal to make, but he's asking for some help. And you shouldn't poo-poo that. You shouldn't ignore it. That has spurred a lot of conversation, which is great conversation for us to have. I'm not sure what direction they're going to go in. I wouldn't be surprised if they went into next season
Still without
and waiting to make that determination. Because you don't know what they're going to do in the off season. Look, we've talked about this before. When the Bruins signed Zdeno Chara, because he was the biggest free agent available at the time, part of the deal was that he would become the captain. And you know what? To his credit, he had a couple of really, really rough years during the early part of his captaincy here, to the point that his wife had said to him, did we make a mistake coming here? But we know how that story ended, and there was a happy ending to that story. Who knows what they'll do in the off season, because stranger things have happened.
Yeah.
I'm not sure at this point that the next captain of the Boston Bruins is on the current roster. I'm really not.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to think of it. But one of the things that we've done for the last few seasons, and for those who have been listeners for a while know that this is something that I've done with my dad for many years, which is we reflect on the season and decide what goes on this season's tombstone. And I had a hard time with this year. In the past, it's been pretty cut and dry. They couldn't finish. They couldn't clear the puck. They couldn't enter the zone. Things like that, right? And last season, my God, we had a wheel to choose which of these things was going to happen where they would lose the game.
That was so gross. That was so gross.
And yet it was accurate.
So gross. But it was right. Yeah.
My initial thought was certainly colored by how their playoff series went. And I had to sit with it for a minute and remind myself that's not necessarily how we come up with that epitaph. It's on the season, not necessarily playoffs. Because again, playoffs are totally
different. Yeah.
Because my initial reaction after they lost to Buffalo, it was lack of urgency. I'm not 100% sure that's how I would still label their tombstone. I think, because I had to be reminded of some interesting stats. So I'm going to share some interesting stats, and then I'm going to ask you how you would want to label this season.
Okay, hit me.
This past season, the Bruins finished with 45 wins, 27 losses, and 10 overtime losses. They finished with 100 points, and they had a .610 points percentage.
And Charlie Jacobs calls that a success, by the way.
Here's the insane thing. I'm going to agree with him because here's a little bit of context. Specifically, last season, we finished 33, 39, and 10 with 76 points and an abysmal 463 points percentage. On average, for the last 10 years, and I've adjusted the COVID years accordingly, average season finished with 52 wins, 26 losses, 11 overtime losses for 116 points. Now, that may seem like significantly better, but the points percentage, 649. So 610, 649, not terribly different. 45 wins, 52 wins. Okay, maybe it's a little bit lower than average. However, the other thing I wanted to point out that I looked at, that first season where the Bruins made the playoffs after a year where they missed. The last time was 2016, 2017. And that season, they went 44, 31, and 7 with 95 points and a 579 points percentage, and they lost in the first round. The other time before that's worth looking at, 2007, 2008, they went 41, 29, 12 with 94 points and a 573 points percentage, and they lost in the first round. So remember, this season, they were 45, 27, and 10, and 100 points with 610 points percentage, and they lost in the first round. Thinking about it in that perspective, was it a below average season for the Boston Bruins? Yes. For what we have known for the last decade of how this team has played, how they have performed, what we have expected of this team. Yeah. In terms of that first year after missing playoffs, they actually overperformed a little bit, and they got as far as they ever have in that first year post missing the playoffs. I find that to be promising.
And no one had them even sniffing the playoffs. When the NHL does all of their preseason previews or season previews, team by team by team, writer by writer by writer, no one, I don't recall anyone who thought the Bruins would even make the playoffs.
Yeah. And the fact that it was basically a decade since the Bruins had missed the playoffs. I think what we saw happen last year, what we saw happen this year, shows that it was a blip like it has been in the past. And I do think that they did a good job. As much as it feels like because of how the season ended, they didn't do a good job, they did do a good job. So that changed what I would say in terms of what I was going to put on the epitaph. Because again, I was also considering things like they were unreliable, or again, there was no urgency. And ultimately, in the end, I think what I'm going to put on the epitaph is self-inflicted, because I think they could have done more. And every time they did well, they shot themselves in the foot.
Self-inflicted wounds. We used that term all season long. Self-inflicted wounds.
They had 4 notable winning streaks. For every single one, there was an equally disastrous losing streak. And they were always right next to each other. They started with a pretty awful losing streak from October 13th to the 27th, followed by a phenomenal winning streak from the 28th to November 11th. And then immediately afterwards, from November 13th to December 2nd, it was a losing streak. And then we had a winning streak. And then we had another winning streak. And then we had a horrible losing streak.
Inconsistent to the epitaph. Inconsistent.
Yes. Yeah. The season ended 13 wins and 12 losses post-Olympic break. They were middle of the pack for goals for and goals against. They were 10th out of 32 in terms of goals for, 14th out of 32 goals against. Like you had said, thank God for good goaltending. If anything, you could even have an asterisk that says the bad side of average, meh. Maybe we could just say meh.
Their eulogy would be, they got great goaltending. They displayed, for the most part, a no-quit attitude. They also had the ability to, quote-unquote, bounce back, but they never had solid, consistent, let's finish the job approach.
This year's a hard one because you can't quite put your finger on it because...
No, and we can't dump on them. Right? We did.
Yeah.
We spent our time doing that, which is our want to do. It's our podcast. However, knowing what we were looking at to start this season, knowing that This organization is in the midst of a rebuild. You can call it a retool. It's a rebuild. We had to expect the ebbs and flows and the ups and downs that they clearly gave us just by your statistics that you provided to us.
Yeah.
Was the season better than we expected? You'd be lying if you said no. It was better than, because none of us saw them being able to put together a significant win streaks. And there were instances where they beat some very good teams.
Yeah.
They took advantage of opportunities that were presented to them and beat some teams that were clearly more talented than they were, that gave us hope. Maybe sometimes it was false hope, but the hope was still there. Now, having said all of that, do we think they are going and heading organizationally in the right direction? Because I still don't think they are. Until they address and find a way, and this is, you know what, Don, this is your job. This is your job. Right? You signed on for this job, but you need to address monumental issues that we have had for a period of going on, I don't even know how many years now. And you need consistent secondary scoring.
Yep.
Can we solve the problem of no secondary scoring?
That's the key. Taking shots and getting goals.
And getting goals. You can't keep putting a Band-Aid on an open wound.
Yeah. They've been trying to treat the symptoms and not the underlying problems.
All in all, was it an entertaining hockey season? Yes.
Yep.
We were entertained. We saw some good hockey being played.
And I think the future is bright. We saw a lot of good things from a lot of the young kids who had the opportunity because they were actually given a training camp, a rookie camp to legitimately fight for a spot. And I think that allowed Boston to inject some youth into the main roster and
things that we have been asking for as fans for
couple
of years now.
Yep.
Okay, great. You heard it. Not that they listen to us, but when you stand up and say that your goal is to make a deep run in the playoffs to bring a Stanley Cup back to Boston, what is your blueprint? Because this is not the blueprint for it, because now you've got other teams in the East that have accelerated their pace in getting there, and you're falling a little bit further behind.
Yeah.
And so you've got to stop signing these players who would on any other teams be good or very good third and fourth line guys.
We shall see what the trading situation is between now and July 1. But if Boston is serious, I think we would see some business happening before July 1, I think. But we'll see.
In our next episode, I think we're going to try and help Don Sweeney solve some of his problems.
Yes, absolutely. We'll be talking about guys who didn't really meet expectations and people we would love to see
moved off this roster. Yeah, moved off this roster. Until that episode, thank you for listening. Please make sure you like and subscribe for more content, and be sure to leave a rating and a review to help other Bruins fans find us. You can support our podcast by joining our Patreon or following us on our socials at Tape to Tape MK and on Substack at tapetotapemk.substack.com. Any closing thoughts, my friend?
Go Bees!
Go Bees!